Welcome to Doctors at Work. My name's Matt Daniel, and this podcast is part of my mission to help doctors create successful and meaningful careers. Today, I'm having a conversation with Frances Cushway, who is a maternity coach. And she tells me that planning for maternity is key even before your maternity leave starts. Becoming a mother is transition, and everybody experiences differently. There's no right way to have maternity and to return back to work. Planning ahead definitely helps, as does a discussion about what your career will look like when you return back from maternity. Welcome, Frances. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Matt. So I am Frances Cushway. I am the founder of the Maternity Coach, and that is we're an organisation who basically support mothers in their transition to and from parental leave. I've been running this business as itself for about 5 years now, but I trained as a career coach nearly 20 years ago, and basically have been, as we say in coaching, niching to women and then finally to the maternity transition over, I guess, the last 15 years or so.
Mhm. And today's topic is around maternity, and I'm interested, what makes maternity a distinct entity when it comes to people's careers?
Yes, so I think the thing about maternity leave is we all tend to underestimate what's actually going on in that time. We focus very much on the fact that someone is taking a prolonged period from work, but actually, what we need to be focusing on in that time is the fact that you have people, whether it's a mother or a father, becoming a parent, and that is a huge transition in identity. Effectively, when we return to work, we are a whole new person. But actually, what we have seen from recent research in neuroscience in particular is that there's a lot going on under the surface for mothers when they're become, or for women when they're becoming a mother. So, starting from when we become pregnant and the hormones circulating our bodies, they're not just there to support our developing baby, but they're also making changes to our brains, which ensure that we bond effectively and we're motivated to look after our babies when they arrive, and effectively make us the most effective caregiver that we can be. Plus, then after, when our baby's here, whether we're a mother or a father, actually we see continued changes in the brain, which further support our caregiving and reactions to our baby. So there's a lot going on in our brains during that time, as well as that transition. From being potentially someone who's quite independent at work, who can manage their diary, can go out when they want, arrange holidays with friends, family, their partners. Um, when that period comes to an end, there can be quite a lot of emotions that go on around that time, thinking about what we're giving up. And if we think about that as a transition following something like Bridges' transition model, we know when we're going through transitions that dealing with the emotions around the transition is so key to ensure we have an effective transition. So while when we're planning our maternity leave, we're thinking about the logistics of how to leave work effectively and how to return effectively, what we also need to be thinking about is the transition to motherhood and what we are effectively letting go of in becoming a mother. Then, once we are a mother, how we support ourselves to integrate becoming a mother into our identity. And then we're also thinking about as almost a second transition in that not only have we become a mother, once we're comfortable with that, we then have to become a working mother and then integrate all of the logistics of work as well as our working identity into our working mother identity into our identity. So there's a lot that goes on in something that actually just looks like a smooth leaving of work and then returning again afterwards.
Maybe let's try and unpack things from the beginning. Let's say, a woman finds out that she's pregnant.
Yeah.
what kind of things should a woman be thinking about, at that stage is, in pregnancy, in preparation for, going on maternity leave. So what are the key things that a woman should be thinking about, planning and preparing for?
Yeah, so preparation is key, not just for leaving work, but also returning to work. And the more preparation you can do before you go on leave, the better your return to work will be. So I think one of the key things to do is to start bringing your support team together as soon as you can. And so that would be your HR contact or your manager, making sure that that you're communicating with them as and when you need to, but also thinking about supporting yourself at work. Having a mentor can be something that's really useful, because that would be someone who's been through maternity leave before and come back to work. They can help with navigating some of the different things that you might need to think about at work, but also how to have the best, I guess, exit and re-entry back to work afterwards. You'd also want somebody who has got your back while you're on leave. I think one of the things that mothers, we often worry about when we're on leave, is being forgotten, being overlooked. And if you've spoken to someone beforehand who you can let them know if there's any new work, training projects, something that you want to be considered for, then that you can relax when you're on leave, because you won't be forgotten. There'll be someone there who's thinking, oh yes, Frances said she wanted to be involved. Let's not forget her. She's coming back in September. So that can really help you, having that key support group in the transition from leave and then when you return. But I think as soon as possible to think about handover, who's going to cover your work while you're away. And if you are getting a replacement in, it can be really reassuring for you to be involved in that process of finding your cover. And thinking about your return to work plan. So what working pattern might you want to return to? When will you want to return? Um, how many days are you going to be working? So thinking about that. Childcare. We know what the state of childcare is in this country at the moment. It's expensive and it's in high demand. So actually thinking about childcare, even when you're still pregnant, can be really useful, and thinking about what kind of childcare you want, and even viewing some places, whether you're looking for um, a childminder, a nursery, a nanny, whatever your options are, start thinking about it as soon as possible. And also thinking about, so I don't know if you're familiar with kit days, which are there. So in this country,
Keeping in touch, keeping in
keeping
touch.
in touch days, yes.
Yeah.
So we're entitled to keep in touch days while we're on leave, which, once we are out of any enhanced pay period, if you do your keep in touch days when you're on statutory or no pay, you're entitled to be paid for these days. And you can do anything on these days that you would normally do as part of your work. So thinking about what you might like to do when you're on leave before you go, to keep in touch, to keep up with training, to keep up with meetings, anything like that can be really helpful. And also coming up with your manager with a communication plan of how you would like your manager to, or your organization generally, to stay in touch with you while you're away. How often do you want to hear from them? How would you like to hear from them? Means that not only do you feel comfortable that you're not going to be forgotten, and you're not going to be worried about being called every 2 minutes, but it does mean that your organization feels really happy with how they've left things, and they know what to do without either bombarding you with too many calls or not calling you enough. And it makes that relationship while you're off much easier to manage. And the last thing I think is just thinking about your career plan, and thinking about how does your maternity leave fit in with your plan, and having a think about it now, so that you can touch back in with this when you come back to work, and see if things are still feeling the same, or if you might like to make some changes.
Mhm. It feels like there's an awful lot to do, and I'm wondering how many women manage to achieve that? Because I'm feeling, oh, there's an awful lot of pressure, and
Yeah,
I've not even been there, but I'm feeling pressure. So do people manage that, or is this is like the gold standard?
it's a gold standard, and I think the key to achieving it is to speak to your organisation and your manager, make sure that you have their support to put this into place, because ultimately, they want you to come back after you've been on leave. And the best way to do that is to help you plan, and to have their support so that you can do all these things,
Mm.
whether it's changing deadlines, reassigning work, whatever you and your manager feel is the best thing for you to do to ensure that you can plan will increase the chances you'll be able to return afterwards, which ultimately everybody wants. So yes, it's tricky, and I think one of the things when I'm working with clients, one of the hardest things is them feeling a pressure that they want to still prove themselves in their run up to leave, that they can still do everything. So they're trying to do all of their work, but they're also trying to prepare. And you can burn out, even in preparation for
Mm.
maternity leave if you're not
Mm.
careful how you manage your time. So I think ultimately speaking to your team, speaking to your line manager, and getting their support to help you prepare is really key.
Yeah. One of the things that I've certainly noticed people worry about, in particularly my area, because I do ear, nose, and throat surgery, is people or women worry about losing the technical skills because there's
Mm.
going to be a period of time, or for somebody else who who maybe works in resus or does cardiac arrest calls or
Mm.
whatever people do. People are going to be away for a period of time, and then how do you maintain those skills? How do you keep those skills up? Yeah. Sort of any thoughts or opinions as to how one might maintain the skills that they have?
So I think that's where we can maybe use kit days to keep your hand in, whether it's training or something that you can do on your kit days so that you feel that you're not going a huge amount of time without
Mm.
using their skills. But it is something, so I do a lot of work with GPs on maternity leave,
Mm.
and it's something I hear when I'm working with them is their concern about losing skills, which unlike a lot of people, they are sometimes life or death skills. As you said, if you're working in resource, it is a life or death skill. So
Mm.
it's making sure, and I think in planning for your leave, thinking about what are the key things that you can do while you're off to keep those skills up. I think that's going to be a vital part of preparation.
And do you think is that a fair worry that women have that they're going to de-skill, or is that the reality that they come back and they just pick it up?
No, Um, I think it's a genuine worry. I think, if we took a long time off work, generally, our skills become rusty,
Mm.
and it's going to take a while to get back up to speed again. And I think one of the key things to remember is that when we return, we're never going to return at 100% because we have been um, immersed in a whole different world for potentially up to a year. There's the research that I've seen is we don't lose our capability, our mental capacities to do things. Women sometimes report that they can't concentrate, they can't remember things as well. But actually, studies have shown that it's only through self reporting that that's been seen.
Mm.
When they've actually tested them, they've not seen any difference between
Mm.
mothers and non mothers or people who've been back for a while. So it's through self reporting that we see a lot of the issues come up. But I think, as with any significant time away, you are going to become a bit more rusty. So I think it is a genuine concern, but I don't think it's something that can't be um, planned for if we do that preparation before we go on leave.
Yeah, I'm wondering for the people that are in training,
Mm.
if they go on maternity whilst in training and then the woman
Yes.
comes back and then they're in training, there's somebody there that's supporting them and
Yes.
supervising them.
Yeah.
So actually, the idea that you're going to come back and you're going to be totally abandoned, like when you're in training, that's really quite unlikely to happen.
Yes.
And I guess sort of it's perhaps more or perhaps it's different for women that come back as consultants or as GP that are very much
Yes.
more independent practitioners, and it's then about how one plans for that retirement. Yeah. Have you got sort of a sense, what does good planning, retirement, returning, what does good planning for returning look like versus what's bad planning?
So when we're on leave,
Yeah.
and we're thinking about returning, I think um, one of the things to do is we often see people experiencing a drop in confidence when they've taken a significant period off work. And actually, there was some research by Vodafone that showed that when you looked at men and women who'd taken a similar amount of time off work, women were much more likely to experience a drop in confidence than men were. So there is something, I think, within women that does make us lose confidence. And we do see that tend to peak around a year after we've had our babies, which is obviously, or 11 months, which is obviously the worst possible time if we're taking a year off work, that we're 11 months, a month before we're going back, we could be seeing our lowest confidence levels. So I think um, we're trying to do things to keep up our confidence while we're on leave can really help with a successful return and help us think it is going to be possible to do it. So one of the things we can do actually in preparation for our leave is to gather together maybe appraisals or feedback that we've had that reminds us of the skills that we've got,
Mm.
so that if we're feeling a bit wobbly when we're on leave, we can review these and that can really give us a bit of a boost. um, but also thinking about when we're on maternity leave, it's almost like go through a process of redefining what success is, so that when we're on leave, we have small wins, and actually acknowledging those can help with our confidence. Because, if you've been before you go on leave and you've had a successful career, you'll probably be celebrating big wins, and you don't tend to get those as much on maternity leave. So anything we can do to keep our confidence up. Kit days obviously are really key in planning our return, and using the days, I guess, nearer to the run up to going back to talk to your manager, to talk to all the key people that you'll be working with about what you want your return to look like. How is it going to fit in with your department, with your practice, wherever you're working? Um, Getting back in touch with your support team, who you hopefully set up before you went on leave, to see what's going on. And I think contacting colleagues as well, to get a feeling for what it's been like for them while you've been off, can also help you rebuild those connections, which are really key for when we return, as well as get a sense for what's going on. And I think, when I was working with GPs during COVID, and for them, so much had changed from when they went on leave to when they came back, and those conversations that they had with their practices about what's changed, how things are going on, really helped give them a confidence boost and help them prepare, so that when they were back in their practice, things, yes, it would have felt different, but they were aware of all the different things that had happened. So I think thinking about that planning while you're on leave as well, and talking to those people. But the key issue that I see, the key concerns I think for people when they're on leave and planning their return, is um, for mums, it's worrying about doing everything. Because when they think about work before they went on leave, and that filled their day, and then they think about what they've been doing on leave, and that's filled their day, they think about, well, how am I going to put these two full days together to find something that's manageable? So I think what I call managing your home contract, which is who does what at home, is really important. So sitting down with your partner, if you're on your own, if you're solo parenting, with whoever's in your support network, to help you look at all of the tasks that need to get done at home, as well as thinking about the mental load challenges that we have, and how you're going to manage those, can be really, really key to a successful transition back to work. Um, One of the things I recommend people do is have a Sunday war room meeting with their partner, or with whoever supports them, to look at that week ahead and think, okay, where are the pressure points for us both in this week? What will we do if our baby or our child is going to be ill? And you can actually even look at each day and see how you'll manage that together. Do you need to bring in extra help? What's your backup childcare options? So I think when you're planning on returning, there's a lot of logistics that goes around the juggle. So thinking about drop-offs, pickups, illness from you, from your partner, for your baby, or for your other children, for if you've got a childminder, if the childminder's ill or the nanny's ill. So putting in place backup plans Because what we don't want to do is, the first day that you're planning on going back, your baby's ill. And if you haven't thought ahead, the panic that you then get as a result of that is just horrible. You don't want that. If you've got a plan, you've then got something you can work through and you feel like you can manage it. You feel like you've got more control. So I think that is really, really key to handling a successful return.
I hope you're enjoying the show. Please click subscribe so you'll be notified when new episodes become available. This podcast is part of my mission to help doctors create successful and meaningful careers. You can be part of that mission too by forwarding this show to one person who you think might benefit from listening. Thank you. Now on with the show. So I'm hearing that, planning, it's all plan as
Yes.
much, of course you can't plan for everything.
You can't plan for
Sort
everything.
of try and plan and think ahead. Can I just rewind to the keeping in touch days, because the
Yes.
podcast has an international audience, so I don't know
Yes.
if people outside of the UK will have that, but maybe can you just sort of explain, what they are and the
Yes.
legal basis sort of behind them?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, part of either the maternity leave or if you're on shared parental leave, is that you are allowed to work for 10 days, and these are calendar days. So, if you only do 1 hour on a day, that still counts as one of your days. So, you're allowed to work 10 calendar days while you are on leave, and this doesn't affect your pay.
Okay.
If you're thinking sensibly, you'd want to work those days when you're either on your statutory pay or not being paid, because then obviously you'll make the benefits of having that paid. If you work these days while you're on full pay, obviously they're not going to pay you double for doing that. They are You are entitled to them, but you don't have to take them. And I don't believe that your organization have to give them to you, but it's something that is advisable to help with the return. So it's a negotiation process between you and your employer as to when to do them, what you'll do on them, and what you'll get paid for them. It's best to plan them before you go on leave, because obviously you've not got 100 other things on your mind typically at that time. And then once your baby has arrived, then you can um, obviously look back at your plan and see, does this still feel right? And think about, do you need childcare for these days? How are you going to manage them? Are you going to do them from home? Are you going to go back to your place of work to do this? So it's then thinking more about the logistics, but they're really, really great. And the mothers that I work with who use them say they find them really beneficial to ease that transition back to work.
Tell me a bit more about this, the identity and transitions. You talked about changing
Yes,
identity and you talked about bridges as a transition model.
yes,
They are sort of you leave, as a pregnant woman, but
yes,
a full time,
yes,
doctor, whatever stage, and you come back sort of, a year later or whatever, as a mother with,
yes,
with a different brain and
yes.
a totally different set of responsibility. So tell me more about this identity and how.
Identity transition. Yeah. So um, when we're thinking about, I guess, the period when we're pregnant before our baby's arrived, um, if you were looking at a British transition model, that would be the period of endings. So
Can,
that's where we're.
can you explain the British transition model?
So the British transition model is a three-stage model where we are looking at how we transition. So he says that change is something that happens, whereas a transition is how we respond to it and the effect psychologically on us. So the three-stage model is kind of before I guess, the original part of you before the transition, which is called endings. Then you have the neutral zone, which is that period of liminality, and then new beginnings when we are, I guess, moving forward with our new identity. And if we're looking at that with respect to becoming a mother or a parent, even, it would work for anybody who's becoming a parent, but for the sake of mothers and the maternity transition, when we're in that endings period, I think for us it's particularly um, obvious that we are going through this transition as our bellies grow bigger. We are less able to do what we were able to do before. We will maybe be changing our diet, what we're doing with our lives, thinking about how it's going to impact our career, what we're sacrificing through this, from our bodies to our careers to our social lives. So that brings up a lot of emotions. And we then, once the baby's arrived, we will be moving into that kind of the neutral zone. um, and for anybody who has been through maternity, who's on maternity, who might be listening to this, um, it's that time when we haven't got that busy social life or busy work life. The way we live today and the way we have our children is very different to, I think, how humans probably were intended to have our babies, where we had a wide network of support from family, extended family, other siblings, many, children that we might have had before. The way we have children today, the neutral zone experience of being on maternity leave and feeling very isolated. We live in our little box. We're very unlikely these days to have family nearby. We're lucky if we do, but we might not because we move for work. We move for our own work. We might move for our partner's work. And with paternity leave being as it is, we might only have our partner at home with us for a couple of weeks. So we're then left with, a tiny baby who doesn't do very much. And we need to learn to be the mother we want to be. And this is where groups like the NCT or any other antenatal group can be really helpful, because support is really key at this stage in the identity transition. We look at what other people are doing, how other new mothers are behaving, thinking what they're doing that you like, that you might like to do, what they're doing that you think, that doesn't work for me. But you're building this new identity of how you want to be as a mother. And we need to find that support to help us with that. It can be very lonely. You can also be dealing with, the physical effects still of birth during this period. So, if you've had a cesarean and your partner's only be able to take 2 weeks off, you're going to be in a period where you're physically quite incapable of even looking after your baby. So that's why support at this stage is really key, and taking it slowly. We can't rush through this phase. It needs to unfold, I guess, at the rate that's right for us.
Mhm.
But what happens the other side when we move into the final stage of new beginnings is we're becoming, and we see the parent that we want to be. We think about how we want to parent, how we want to look after our children, how we want to be with our friends and our family now, how we're going to, return to work and reintegrate that part of our lives. So we can feel energized, we can feel like we're, really renewed at this stage, and we'll feel like a whole new person. And I think we might then be looking at how our return to work is aligned with our values. We might see our values have changed as a result of this. And it's not unusual to see women at this stage have a potential career change because they feel they want to do something that's more aligned with their values now. As a parent, they might sidestep to a different role, they might move organizations to somewhere that actually feels that the culture is more aligned with their values of being a working mother. It's an amazing transition, I think, that we go to.
Mhm. So I think the key that I'm hearing there is, again, if I kind of think from a medical context, there's the woman as a professional doctor before she goes on maternity leave, or perhaps even before she's pregnant. And then when she comes back, there's now a totally different set of responsibilities, a totally different, maybe a totally different set of interests as well as responsibility.
Yeah.
And it sounds like sort of it's very individual, sort of how one defines and develops that new identity.
Absolutely. It's really individual. And I think that's the key thing when, if you're a manager supporting somebody who is coming back from maternity leave, although we know that there are very common themes that emerge, you need to get to know your colleague as an individual and find out what they want going forward from their career, and having those conversations really early on when they come back to work about what they want to get involved with now, and not assuming. There's a very common assumption that once women have babies that they're not career driven, and that's absolutely not what we see. Women are typically equally career driven, and then I think the most common thing that causes a lack of ambition is the fact that they can't see how they're going to get on at work as a mother. So it's not coming internally from their own drive, it's coming from the external influences that are making them think it's not possible to succeed in my career and be a mother, because everybody leaves when they come back, or people get sidelined, or they get pulled down to lower level projects or less interesting work. But actually what we do see through caregiving is, it's reported there was some research last year in the States that looked at the skills that people who have been caregiving bring back to work. And this isn't just being a parent, but it's any kind of caring. That one of the top skills that people thought they brought back to work was empathy, which for anyone in the medical profession, is hugely important. So when you've got people coming back as new mothers or new fathers who've been caring for children, the skills that they've picked up on that time, yes, they might have lost some of the technical skills, which they will be able to pick up with time and, potentially training and just, practice doing it again. They're coming back with skills that are really beneficial to their careers: empathy, efficiency, resilience, planning, organizing. If you think about the skills you use as a parent, they're really great to bring back to work. And one of the other things that I've noticed in clients that I'm working with is how we need to flex our parenting style in dealing with our children, particularly as they grow older. That actually could lead to you being able to better flex your leadership style when you're back at work,
Mm.
because you've had that experience of sometimes being more directive, sometimes being more collaborative. So potentially as a leader, we could see people being more effective as leaders as a result of their experience in parenting and caregiving.
I think the key thing I'm hearing this is that probably things are going to be different afterwards. Yeah, not necessarily, but probably. And
Mm,
maybe if I think for me as a trainer or as a colleague, sort of, or as somebody's boss, whatever terminology that we use, that if I assume that a woman's going to come back and things are going to be exactly the same as they were before maternity, that then probably that's not a useful assumption. But
mm,
equally, if I make an assumption that, okay, she's now a mother, she's not going to be interested in X, Y, and Z, she's just going to want to go home and look after the children, that also sort of isn't a useful assumption. But,
mm,
but perhaps, the key thing would be, if I'm kind of thinking for people that are line managers, trainers, whatever, as well as for the women, is that things are going to be different probably, but
mm,
there's a whole new relationship that will develop. There's a new identity that will develop, and that's going to be very different and very individual.
mm,
And it's perhaps it's not making assumptions that things are going to
mm,
be the same, or not making assumptions that things are going to be
mm.
different. But the starting point would be, let's negotiate what the future looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the thing with assumptions is we have to we have to have this kind of way of making assumptions and biases for us to function as humans, because our brains couldn't cope if we didn't use assumptions and biases. And as long as we're aware of what our biases or assumptions are, it means that we won't then let them impact on our colleagues around us. And I think, it's very common if you're working somewhere where all of everyone who's returned to work has gone part-time. It doesn't mean that you should assume that the next person is going to work part time. And it's just thinking, okay, I have this assumption that they're going to want to come back part time. But rather than assuming that, I will say to them, how would you like to return? And it's just treating everybody as if they're the first person that you've dealt with going through leave, and that whatever they might want to do, you have no, you have no awareness. So it's just asking them the questions, treating them as an individual, and offering them the support that they need.
Um, any other tips in relation to a line manager or a trainer when a woman comes
Mm,
back? I'm going to come back to any tips for a woman returning. That's going to be
yes.
the final question. But my penultimate question, sort of, any
Yes,
other tips, for me, for other men and women
yes,
that are supporting, working with, managing, training women around
yes.
maternity. What tips would you have for people that are around a woman?
I would say number one is listen to them and ask them what they want without making assumptions. Um, Not assuming that they're going to come back at 100% because they won't, and working with them, coming up with a plan as to how they can build up to that. So thinking about whether it's a phased return or a phased handback of responsibilities. I would say looking at the culture within which they're going to return, and is this something that is supportive of parents? So do you frequently start the day before a nursery will open, or before your colleagues can drop off their children and get into work? Because nursery times, unfortunately, are not flexible. So it's looking at how you organise meetings and your start and finish times to make it possible for your parents to drop off their child and pick them up afterwards, because that's always a huge issue for parents, is managing those kind of start and end times of the day. um, Talking to them about their careers, I think, is another thing, and saying to them, right, you're back, and you're, maybe a few weeks in, once they've got back, they're a bit more familiar with what they're doing again, having that kind of career conversation. What would you like now you're back? And thinking about their career plan so you can support them, to continue their career with you, to continue to build their career. And, showing that support will mean they'll feel more connected to you and more loyal to your organization and want to stay. So, those are really key things.
And then my final question, what would be your top tips for the new mother?
Top tips. So, just summarizing, I guess, what we've said. So, thinking about the fact that maternity leave is an identity transition. It's not a holiday. There's a lot going on, that you need to be prepared for, and if you're supporting people to understand that it's a big identity transition that they're going through. Preparation is key at all stages. Um, Thinking about your confidence, and that it is likely that you will feel a drop in confidence, but there are things that we can do to build that up again. Thinking about the second shift and mental load, talking to your support group, whether it's your partner or other people who support you, in your life in general, about how to manage that. Um, I think we can often lose sight of the fact that we are still a person, in our own right, and so making time for ourselves, but also time to spend with our partners away from our children, because that can be really tricky and requires a lot of planning, as most of the things do. Um, Thinking about our career and how we want it to evolve after leave is really important. And I think one thing that, when I'm working with clients, we're talking about careers, is we almost forget that we could have a quite significant period of our career after maternity leave. We could have potentially 20 years of a successful, happy career afterwards. And what we do see with women in that time is that that part of our career is really important. And one of the key motivators at that time can be around doing something that feels authentic to who we are. But also, it's a time where women sometimes think about, giving back to society, and something that is, feeling beneficial for the greater good. So, not forgetting that part of our career is coming and can be really rewarding. The Sunday war room meeting, really key, when we're going back. Um, and if we have any concerns or worries, address them quickly before they become big problems, is really, really important. And finally, we're not going to return at 100%. Be kind to yourself. Think about how you can phase back into work so that you don't burn out too quickly, and you pick up the skills that you need to at a rate that's right for you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you for having me.